I'm going to use the small drawing board 6 to trace out an image for the shaper origin. This image is a Celtic mask. I've printed the mask and I'm applying it to the drawing board with masking tape. I'll be using Logic Trace 2018, but the first thing I have to do is establish the 4 reference points. I've also selected tracing polylines. A lot of the internal tracing I'm just going to use unconnected tracing. I'm also going to let some of the lines cross the perimeter outline, and later on I'll edit that out by using the scissors to cut those off. It's easier to cut a vector than it is to add on. The diagram has a lot of internal tracing. I'm also using a blue pencil to show where I started from. Anything that I want to be a closed vector, I select tracing with polylines. Anything that's just an internal, say a line, I'll just use unconnected. I'll be switching back and forth from tracing polylines to unconnected. This drawing board has a plastic film. I could have put the paper underneath the film, but because I want to mark where my start spots are with that blue pencil, I put the paper on top. This drawing board is very portable, very nice to work with. The printed diagram and my workpiece are the same size. I like to trace out a large diagram. It's easier. The blue marks also help me keep track of what parts are done. Once I'm finished tracing and digitizing this diagram, I'll be saving this file as an SVG file for the shaper origin, and that machine is a portable CNC machine. And I will show how this file is going to be engraved. There's a lot of small parts to be traced out, but it goes along very easily. The tracing's pretty well complete now, so we're going to load that file into Vectric Aspire 10.5, check the vectors, and save it as an SVG file for shaper origin. I've also taped down my workpiece to the workstation. The initial scan is done, and we're all set now to start our engrave. Before any engraving takes place, shaper origin has to scan that identification domino tape in the front, and you have to keep that in view at all times, or it will stop. It's quite amazing to follow the line with the shaper origin because you think you're shaking and moving around, but it's cutting straight and perfect. One of the challenges that I'm finding is to make sure that you've got all the engraves or the cuts done before you quit. It's got such a large surface area or base that you really can't see until you remove shaper origin from your workpiece and then have a look at the cut and compare it to the diagram. Also, a worthwhile note here is feed rate. When the diagram has nooks and crooks and very tight angles, you've got to slow right down, or the router bit will jump back and you've got to restart. When you restart the cut or the engrave, You have to restart where Shaper Origin tells you to restart looking at the display. If you don't, the bit will not come down. The base slides along the workpiece pretty smooth. You get a little bit tense in your arms, but you gotta just learn to relax and just push it along at a nice slow pace. I was surprised that the masking tape underneath my workpiece attached to the workstation was all that was required to keep that piece stationary. Setting up the workstation with my workpiece was very simple. They've got a piece that goes across which makes sure that it's level. Once you're level, you just lock the workstation. A dotted line showing up like that is where you engrave, and when that line turns solid blue, it's been done. The one small thing that I need to do more work on is the anchor point, and I always select a center anchor point. It's difficult to eyeball the router bit and your spot that you've marked on your workpiece as your center. So far I've been using measurements from the base of the Shaper Origin to the edge of my workpiece. The other tip I have here is that when I first purchased Shaper Origin, I purchased the machine alone, and then I purchased the workstation. I recommend the workstation. It just seems to be a better identification domino tape area, and it will do a large workpiece. I figure it'll do about a 15 by 19 piece. I also figured that if it was a larger piece, I would just add on identification domino tape on the left and on the right hand side. This portable CNC machine does not replace a regular CNC machine with a gantry, but it has its uses. Being portable, I'm sure will make it useful in the future. You can see here the engraved looks good. Now I'm going to remove the workpiece from the workstation. Here I've applied a black paint and a finish. The Celtic mask is done.